Thank you for joining us for part 3 of a series focused on trauma-informed teaching during a pandemic. In this final presentation, we will focus specifically on the teacher's health and well-being during this difficult time. Our objectives for part 3 include examining the risks to teacher wellness, introducing the concept of trauma stewardship, summarizing practices for teacher trauma care, and then we're going to present a brief exercise for trauma stress relief. Physicians are keenly aware of how stress levels can affect your physical health. Perhaps your doctor has had a conversation with you about your body's stress response during a well-check visit. Some stress energizes us and gives us exactly what we need to pull through a difficult circumstance. But when we experience prolonged stress, our bodies continue to react as if we're in crisis. Hormones continue to be released in this response, and eventually it can suppress our immune system. Heightened risk for disease is a product of this kind of stress. In addition, our heart rate and blood pressure increases, and if we add unhealthy coping mechanisms to the mix like tobacco or other substances, we can increase this even more. The first step towards reducing the ill effects of stress is acknowledging the new and intense challenges each of you are facing in this profession during the pandemic. First, let's look at the special occupational challenges you specifically face. Think about the virtual instruction challenges that you've faced, technical difficulties, online discipline, and what about handling your feelings of being off-site and seeing how the kids are reacting? What about hybrid schooling challenges, trying to enforce safety precautions, for example? Ongoing fears of spreading the virus or catching it? Missing class time when you have to quarantine? Then there's a lot of back and forth between virtual and hybrid. These transitions are tough. Next, consider your personal pandemic challenges. It is important to note that while we've focused part 1 and 2 of this series on trauma and adverse childhood experiences that affect children in our classrooms, teachers may each have lingering ill effects from their own adverse experiences. Especially now, your own history may even compound your pandemic stress. Center for Disease Control lists specific stressors adults historically experience due to a traumatic event, such as the COVID-19 pandemic. Each person will experience varying degrees of trauma and may have different thresholds. Personal resilience may ebb and flow throughout the public health crisis. You may experience disrupted sleep patterns or eating patterns, financial worries, concerns about limited services or resources right now. You may find increased substance use within yourself or within your home, increased feelings of anger, sadness, anxiety, or loneliness, worsening mental health conditions, or worsening chronic illnesses. But you may be asking, I generally cope well. Why am I having problems now? If you are unsure why you're struggling when you've been able to handle difficult life circumstances well in the past, ask yourself if the difference is your high level of trauma you are currently exposed to. Also, are you using ways to cope that you did in the past, but maybe they aren't as sufficient for the unique circumstances of today's world? Consider Dr. Vandernoot Lipsky's explanation. She says, many of us develop coping mechanisms that serve us extremely well in the moment. Outside of the moment of crisis, they may no longer provide any benefit. And yet, even with the passage of time, the changing of circumstances, and our own individual growth, we continue to employ our now outdated coping skills. Vandernoot-Lipsky asks each of us to examine what it is we are doing to cope right now. While some practices were not problematic in the past, some may ramp up during this prolonged pandemic and cause higher risk to our long-term health. We're using alcohol as an example in this model, but other examples are tobacco use, or maybe misusing medications, or taking illicit drugs to curb stress. Consider your wellness wheel. How balanced is it? We may be able to just get by in the pandemic, but if we become aware of where we lack support in one of these aspects of our wellness, we can address it proactively and actually thrive, meeting our challenge head on. The pandemic may take a toll on each of these aspects in our lives that usually bring us vitality and happiness. Consider your spiritual health, your emotional, your social health, your physical and environmental health, your financial and intellectual health. Once you've examined what your wellness wheel reveals for you personally, it's time to address the fact that teachers are also holding on to trauma experienced by their students and by their own families. This is called secondary trauma, and to combat burnout, teachers can practice healthy trauma stewardship. First, know that secondary trauma would be defined as indirect exposure to others' traumatic experiences. We would often call this compassion fatigue. Teachers may be having difficulty with secondary trauma if they're having dreams about students they're worried about, having trouble concentrating or sleeping, or feeling numb or detached. It will be very important for teachers experiencing this to seek support, to debrief with trusted adults, especially through the school's network. Many first responders, like law enforcement, EMS workers, crisis counselors, or nurses, they point out that these trauma responses can become debilitating if unaddressed. To become a good steward, ask yourself if you're responding to your current personal and occupational challenges in any of these ways. Take a look at this list. A few we'll point out would be the feeling of helplessness or hopelessness, feeling that you just can't get enough done, that you need or want to do more, but you're feeling exhausted, guilty, afraid, angry, maybe numb. Maybe you're feeling that your creativity itself is diminished. Maybe you're even avoiding certain things that you have to do. Being a good steward of your students' trauma and your own trauma during the pandemic takes some specific and seemingly simple adjustments. For example, try modifying your definition of a good day. And remember that small victories keep you moving forward, even if it's just so slightly. Celebrate these small victories with your students. Next, stop believing that you must push back or ignore your trauma responses. Slow down and look at what you are experiencing without judging yourself. Focus on what you can control and make small goals for yourself. We understand now that internalizing others' suffering is detrimental to our health and ultimately to the students that we want to help. It's natural for teachers to have high expectations of their reactions to adversity. They are generally in their occupation because they are motivated, intelligent, and rational people. However, trauma can affect anyone and intensify feelings of anxiety and depression. This creates some cognitive impairments, causing distorted thinking and negative self-talk. Do not stay isolated. Reach out within your school network for support. Let them help you recognize any dysfunctional thoughts and focus your energy on righting them. So where does a teacher muster the extra energy to combat dysfunctional thoughts? Dr. Stephen Sobel suggests to pull back on other pre-pandemic high expectations that you have of yourself and begin by pacing yourself, admitting your fears, remembering that this is new territory for everyone. Acknowledge any anger you're feeling and let other people help you. If someone has suggested that they do some errands for you, or if they're willing to be a sounding board, let them. It'll help them feel better too. Another big stress for teachers during this time can be if they have to quarantine. When someone you've been in close contact with contracts COVID-19, you will need to quarantine at home for 14 days. Be ready in case you need to stay home by knowing the symptoms and having a documented plan for your health care and household care should you become ill. Keep the COVID-19 hotline on that list and make sure you have supplies on hand that will alleviate symptoms if they arise. During quarantine, you may not experience symptoms of the disease and become easily frustrated for missing instruction time in the classroom. Passing the baton to another teacher during quarantine is one of several challenges you'll face. Plan ahead and work with administration to develop teaching team relationships and short-term transition plans. Research has shown us that in many subjects, levels of post-traumatic stress disorder increase after day 10 of a quarantine. So for your emotional health during a period of quarantine, engage in the following practices. Avoid checking the news just before sleeping. Blue light from screens interferes with our sleep patterns, and any upsetting news will make relaxation much more difficult. Create a new daily routine for yourself to add structure to your day. Maybe even keep track of it on a calendar and take breaks throughout your day. Be self-compassionate. Don't expect to have a consistent or familiar family dynamic. If you're being tough on yourself or even tough on other people in your house, ask, is this how I would speak to a friend? Discover a new activity. Think about old hobbies while you're social distancing. Stay connected, even if just by short text messages or calling friends or family. Make a list of the people you want to check in on. And exercise, even if it's indoors with an online workout. At this point in our presentation, I would like to bring us to brief exercises for relief from traumatic stress. These next few exercises are from the book Trauma Stewardship, an Everyday Guide to Caring for Self While Caring for Others by Laura Vandernoot-Lipsky. It may help to have a pen and a piece of paper ready. When your day begins, close your eyes, take several deep breaths, and ask yourself, what is my intention today? At the end of your day, what can I put down? What am I ready to be done with? What don't I need to carry with me for another day? Put it down and don't pick it up again the next day. Write down on a scrap of paper one thing that you will let go tonight. At both the beginning and end of your workday, take a moment to think of one thing you're grateful for. Every single day, think of one person you are grateful to and tell that person so. Take the lead in thanking others. Add one thing or one person you are grateful for into a notebook now. Take a moment to literally stop in your tracks and ask yourself, why am I doing what I am doing? After hearing your answer, remind yourself gently that you are making a choice to do this work. Take a deep breath, breathe in both the responsibility and the freedom of this acknowledgement. Try this now. Finally, ask yourself what your ancestors and those who raised you have done throughout time to heal themselves and others. When they experienced trauma, how did they go on? You may want more information on this topic. Look to trusted resources like CDC or SAMHSA and the National Council for Behavioral Health. The National Council for Behavioral Health will actually hold part 2 of a free webinar on December 15th. You may use the information here on this slide to register. Thank you for participating. Please see the guide that accompanies this presentation for more information. Also, please reach out if you would like more education on this topic from the team at Central Shenandoah Health District by email. You are encouraged to ask questions about coronavirus through the local COVID-19 hotline. Please continue to engage in COVID conversations such as this and help us spread the word, and be well.